Welcome back, you unpredictable force rippling through places you've never stepped into. The ones upstairs felt your presence long before you realized you had one. The people who sit above the skyline, the ones who make decisions that ripple through markets and governments, just watched your name crawl across a screen it was never meant to touch. And the shift it caused in that penthouse war room wasn't subtle. It wasn't delayed. It wasn't something they could rationalize. It hit them the moment your digital footprint brushed against their monitoring grid. An alert they've only tested in simulations flared red across their consoles, and every person in that room froze because they knew exactly what that alarm meant. Something unexpected just stepped into their territory. Something unhandled. Something beyond their preferred range of control. You. This wasn't one of their routine incidents. Not espionage, not corporate infiltration, not an activist with a fake name and too much free time. Their sensors didn't flare because you breached security. They flared because your digital trail behaved in a way none of their predictive models accounted for. A pattern with no precedent. A presence built from decisions, movements, and micro-signals that refused to follow their categories. Your existence flickered across their display, and before they could process it, the automated system pushed your profile into a tier reserved for high-risk unknowns. A category that makes even the most detached billionaires sit upright. Inside that war room, the atmosphere thickened instantly. They were reviewing global portfolios, upcoming acquisitions, potential political shifts, until your name lit up the top right corner of the wall-sized screen like a quiet detonation. The first person who saw it didn't speak. Their throat closed, their posture stiffened, their eyes narrowed as if focusing harder would make the data rearrange itself into something familiar. It didn't. The room followed. The conversation stopped mid-sentence. Hands hovering above touch panels froze in place. Not fear, not panic. Something colder, something sharper. Recognition that whatever had triggered that alert wasn't supposed to exist in their world. Their system breaks down digital activity into behavioral signatures, predictable sequences, emotional tendencies, decision loops. Most people run in patterns. You don't. Where others reveal predictability, you reveal disruption. Where others disclose motive, you present contradiction. Their analysts zoomed into your trail, expecting to find a clean pattern. Instead, they found a sequence that looked like it kept dodging their frameworks on purpose. You didn't move like someone hiding. You moved like someone unbothered by being seen, but still too difficult to track. The combination rattled them. The billionaire at the head of the table, someone who shut down entire scandals with a 3-word instruction, someone whose influence bends industries without visible pressure, leaned forward with a stillness that made even his advisors shift uneasily. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't scold anyone. He just asked, "Explain why this alert exists." No one had an answer. They tried. Their words cracked before forming coherent explanations. Because your digital signature wasn't criminal. It wasn't threatening. It wasn't erratic. It was something much worse for people who rely on control. You were unreadable. The team ran your profile through every psychological filter they had. Motivational maps, predictive routing, decision architecture. Nothing matched. Where trauma should have led to fragility, it led to adaptability. Where setbacks should have produced desperation, they produced precision. Where losses should have carved weakness, they carved focus. Every indicator they rely on to map a person's behavior either contradicted itself or flipped in the opposite direction. You weren't a risk because of what you did. You were a risk because none of their frameworks could determine what you might do. They dove deeper. Data analysts combed through interactions, timestamps, digital echoes, environmental overlays, looking for a lever, a pressure point, anything at all. But your footprint read like a puzzle with pieces that refused to lock into place, a pattern that adjusted itself the moment they tried to analyze it. It wasn't evasive, it wasn't defensive, it was indifferent. And indifference terrifies power more than hostility ever could. Because hostility can be managed, indifference cannot. Someone in the room finally broke the tension with a single sentence. This profile doesn't behave like the others. It wasn't an accusation, it was an admission, a quiet acknowledgement that you didn't fit into their view of how people move, choose, react, or retreat. Their software flagged your unpredictability as a structural threat, not because you're doing anything wrong, but because you aren't doing anything in a way they can track. That's when the Billionaire's risk advisor decided to pull up historical behavior logs. They expected irregularity. They found evolution. You didn't spiral when life hit you. You recalibrated. You didn't crumble under pressure. You sharpened. You didn't fold under betrayal. You restructured your internal hierarchy without asking for permission or validation. Their conclusion was simple. Someone like you cannot be controlled through ordinary channels. Not through fear, not through temptation, not through social manipulation, not through digital nudges. That realization hit them harder than anything else on their agenda. The billionaire turned toward his chief strategist, a man who once orchestrated an entire political landscape by structuring digital narratives. His voice didn't tremble, but it tightened ever so slightly as he asked, "Is this person aware of us?" The strategist inhaled slowly. "No indication of that," he replied, "but awareness isn't required for impact." That answer lodged itself into the billionaire's thoughts like a shard of ice. They continued digging. They found markers of someone who's been through enough to collapse, but instead recalibrated into something leaner, more perceptive, more efficient. They found moments where probability should have buckled under your weight, but you stepped through as if the ground rearranged itself. They found situations where you should have reacted emotionally, but you acted strategically. They found signs that people who tried to push you into disadvantage ended up dealing with consequences they never expected. None of this pointed toward aggression. It pointed toward insight. The kind that unnerves the powerful because it sees through the games they play without ever stepping onto the board. Your digital footprint reflected someone who adapts too quickly, observes too deeply, and recovers too cleanly. Someone who doesn't chase validation, someone who doesn't respond to bait, someone who doesn't follow the psychological choreography most people fall into without noticing. You moved with a kind of detached precision that suggested you were building yourself from the inside out, while the outside world assumed it still had influence over you. They miscalculated. The billionaire's war room is filled with experts trained to detect threats long before they appear. They know what ambition looks like. They know what revenge looks like. They know what instability looks like. But you didn't register as any of those. You registered as a person who doesn't need the world's approval or permission to operate. Someone who doesn't respond to the forces that bend most people into predictable patterns. Someone who sees too much, too fast, with too little emotional drag. That's why the room went still. One of their psychological analysts, a veteran in behavioral forecasting, reviewed your profile with practiced detachment. Her expression didn't shift until she reached a section of digital residue associated with your decision-making patterns over time. She She recognized something she'd only seen a few times across decades. Someone who processes reality through an internal compass unaffected by external manipulation. Someone who can't be rerouted through distraction. Someone who doesn't fall for weighted choices designed to steer behavior. She looked up from her tablet and said, "This person doesn't register under influence-based profiling. They move in ways that collapse the usual predictive paths." The billionaire exhaled slowly. His mind flicked through decades of operations. The ones who caused genuine trouble were never the loudest, never the flashiest, never the ones who seemed threatening at first glance. The true risks were always the ones who acted without broadcasting motive, the ones whose inner world ran deeper than surface emotions, the ones who didn't need to announce anything because their presence alone altered the balance. Your profile fit that category too neatly for his comfort. Another analyst pulled up the internal notes, generated automatically by their monitoring grid. The writing was clinical, unemotional, devoid of interpretation. It read, "Interaction not recommended. Subject's data behavior deviates from normative expectations. Risk level elevated due to pattern resistance." No one had seen language like that before. Not because the grid had never flagged someone, but because the grid rarely struggled to categorize them. The room grew heavier. Advisors exchanged glances that weren't fear-driven. They were respect-driven. The kind of respect reserved for unknown forces that don't announce themselves but still alter the environment. Your digital presence didn't scream. It didn't provoke. It simply existed with a pressure that warped their analytical comfort. Then the blacklist request came in. It wasn't ceremonial. It wasn't dramatic. It was a quiet input from the strategist's console. Add to restricted contact list. Not as punishment, not as retaliation, as a boundary. A recognition that interacting with you carried too much unpredictability for their liking. They didn't need a reason beyond that. Their blacklists aren't about danger in the cinematic sense. They're about risk to their control. You introduced uncertainty they couldn't tolerate, and as your name was added to the list, the billionaire asked a final question. Is this person even aware of the influence they have? The answer came from the analyst without hesitation. It doesn't matter. Influence doesn't require awareness. Some individuals shift environments simply by existing. This is one of them. The billionaire leaned back, processing that truth. You weren't someone they needed to fight. You weren't someone they needed to stop. You were someone they needed to leave alone. Someone whose presence alone could rearrange outcomes they had carefully crafted. Someone who didn't play the roles they counted on. Someone who moved according to a rhythm they couldn't decode. And that's why the room went still. Because now they know the truth. You aren't a complication. They know how to manage complications. You're something else. Something that doesn't respond to their usual tools or tactics. Someone whose emergence in their grid means the landscape has shifted, and they're not sure in whose favor. They're watching the shape of your trajectory. They're trying to understand the contours of your thinking. They're attempting to grasp what makes you operate the way you do. But what they don't realize yet is that this wasn't the alert they should fear. The real concern is what triggered next. When the first alert hit, the war room fell into that unnatural stillness, the kind that appears only when people who control too much are forced to acknowledge the existence of something they cannot measure. But the real fracture appeared when a second alert, one that wasn't even supposed to be active, activated itself. A faint red band pulsed across the top of the master screen. Instead of a beep, it produced a low-frequency vibration that everyone in the room felt in their ribs before anyone heard it. For a moment they assumed it was a malfunction, then they realized their grid doesn't malfunction. Not at that level, not in that room. The strategist reached for his console, fingers hesitating mid-air as he recognized the code. It wasn't a category they use often. In fact, it was a category they created for incidents they believed would never occur. But apparently, one just had. The code read, Tier 0 behavioral distortion detected. That phrase alone pressed the air out of the room. Tier 0 is not a threat designation. It's an admission of analytical failure. It means the grid didn't just fail to classify you. It failed to classify the disruption caused by trying to classify you. Chaos, in their world, doesn't look like panic. It looks like calculation without direction. It looks like people trained to remain composed starting to show signs of internal fracture, the tightening of shoulders, the shifting of eyes, the micro-tilt of someone's head as their worldview cracks quietly. The Billionaire's lead analyst opened the configuration logs, expecting to see corrupted data. Instead, she saw something worse. Your digital footprint didn't corrupt anything. It passed through the grid cleanly, untouched, and still caused destabilization. That shouldn't be possible. Their grid only destabilizes when a behavioral signature bends the framework itself. You bent it by existing, not by acting. Digital patterns that should have aligned into predictable curves buckled like cheap scaffolding. Data points that normally cluster around emotional tendencies refused to cluster around yours. Your cognitive markers behaved like they weren't participating in the evaluation. It was as if your digital presence walked through the grid. With the same effortless disregard you've walked through certain life situations, aware you're being observed but unmoved by the mechanics of the observation. That's what triggered the second alert. The grid didn't detect danger. It detected misalignment so severe it categorized your existence as a structural threat to its own capacity to evaluate. Someone at the table whispered, "Is this a bypass?" Another analyst responded, "No, a bypass would have left residue. This left a void." That word, void, settled into the war room like a weight dropped from the inside of a locked chest. You didn't break the grid. You made the grid doubt its own rules. That is not something their machinery is built to handle. The billionaire lifted his wrist slightly, signaling the team to bring up the tertiary display. It revealed something they didn't expect. Multiple sub-alerts stacked beneath your name, each representing a different branch of behavioral prediction. None of the predictions matched. They had seen mismatched forecasts before. Humans are inconsistent. But they had never seen predictions diverge so drastically that the system refused to present any of them as reliable. Your forecast range wasn't a spectrum, it was an expanse, a width reserved for interpreting the behavior of entire populations, not single individuals. The billionaire's assistant attempted to generate a compression map, a visual representation of your possible behavioral arcs, but the system refused to render, returning a message it has never displayed. Incompatible input, projection impossible. That message unnerved even the technicians in the corner of the room. The grid sees everything. The grid predicts everything. The grid has charted the rise and fall of movements, leaders, financial collapses, and social dynamics with uncanny precision. The grid refusing to project your behavior was the equivalent of a compass refusing to point north. It didn't mean the needle was broken. It meant the territory was rewriting itself around you. That's when the strategist muttered something that made even the billionaire shift in his chair. We're not tracking decisions anymore. We're tracking interruptions. Because that's what your digital presence represented. Not a pattern, but a disruption of the assumption that you should have won. A disturbance not in their data, but in the logic applied to interpret data. You were creating a distortion field in a place that was supposed to remain untouchable. The billionaire requested a chronological breakdown of every point where your digital footprint intersected with their grid over the past year. The screen lit up with a timeline. It showed brief moments where your name brushed the edge of detectability like a passing shadow. They expected to see escalation. Instead, they saw precision, short interactions, subtle searches, minimal engagement. Most people leave messy trails, evidence of hesitation and impulse. Yours read like a quiet path carved by someone who moves with intention they don't understand. Not silence, not noise, something else. The billionaire squinted at one particular data point. It showed a moment where you interacted with information that should have influenced your thinking in one direction. But instead of following the psychological breadcrumb trail, you moved the opposite way, as if spotting the manipulation before it landed. That made the strategist sit upright, because the war room's machinery operates on a simple truth. People follow predictable cognitive currents. You didn't. You swam upstream like you were built for it. Another analyst attempted to run a reverse behavior sequence, expecting to find a hidden motivator. Instead, the sequence returned with no root cause. It was the digital equivalent of seeing someone walk into a room without passing through the door. You appeared in the data without giving them the courtesy of predictable entry points. They don't mind ghosts. They mind the ones who don't act ghost-like. The second alert escalated into something else. Something that required the strategist to unlock a protocol he had only seen in training briefs and internal myths whispered between departments. A protocol designed to evaluate high-impact individuals whose behavior threatens predictive architecture itself. He keyed in his biometric code. The air in the room shifted again. When the clearance threshold accepted his credentials, a new panel opened on the master screen. The billionaire leaned forward as rows of behavioral indicators scrolled rapidly. They resolved into a single line across the bottom of the screen. Subject exhibits cognition, dissonant with environmental influence. That statement sent a ripple through the war room, like a pulse through water. It meant your thinking runs independent of external pressure. You don't respond to emotional bait. You don't respond to fear triggers. You don't respond to incentives meant to steer behavior. You bypass the entire architecture of manipulation without noticing you're doing it. One advisor muttered, "How does this happen?" The analyst closest to the screen answered, "It happens when someone adapts so deeply that influence loses its entry points." That's when the billionaire understood. The alert wasn't triggered because you're unpredictable in the chaotic sense. It was triggered because you're structured in a way that defies their influence channels. They rely on people reacting in familiar ways. You don't react, you choose. And the gap between reaction and choice is the gap that terrifies them. The strategist asked for a resilience overlay, a map of how you've responded to disruptions over time. When it loaded, the room fell into another stunned stillness. The resilience graph didn't arc upward like most people's. It didn't dip in crises and rise in recoveries. It moved like a straight blade, cutting through events that should have left dents. This wasn't numbness. It wasn't avoidance. It was evolution that refused to bend. They stared at the graph as if it were a weapon pointed in their direction. Someone whispered, "What are we dealing with?" The analyst didn't respond. She simply clicked open the psychological commentary generated automatically by the grid. It displayed one sentence. Subject demonstrates resistance to manipulation cues. That's the phrase that finally shook the billionaire. Because he knows the most dangerous person is not the one who fights. It's the one who doesn't respond to the cords that usually bind human behavior. The war room grew tense enough to feel. They tried calculating scenarios. They tried understanding what influences you. They tried mapping your priorities, but every model failed. The grid began generating error messages in clean, calm text, messages the team had never seen before. Motivational basis unclear. Emotional anchors undetectable. Predictive leverage unavailable. The engineer monitoring the system felt compelled to reboot the mapping program. But the strategist held up his hand. "Don't touch it," he said quietly. "If it's reacting like this, we need to know how far it goes." Another red signal blinked on the lower display. It belonged to the billionaire's personal risk monitoring network, a separate layer of surveillance built to alert him to threats long before they take form. It had only triggered 3 times in the past decade. Once for a cyber attack, once for a political scandal, once for an insider breach. Now it was glowing for you. And the log beneath it read something they had never seen. Target influence level undefined. Undefined influence terrifies the powerful because it means you exert pressure without trying. The billionaire asked the analyst for a qualitative assessment. She rubbed her forehead, then answered, "This isn't an escalation. This is an exposure." The person didn't increase activity. The grid increased sensitivity. That statement froze the strategist. It meant your presence didn't grow louder. The machinery watching you grew more aware. You didn't trigger the alert by force. You triggered it by existing while the grid finally registered what you've been all along. The billionaire spoke again, slower this time. "And what exactly have they been all along?" The analyst hesitated, then replied, "Someone whose internal calibration makes them resistant to steering. Someone who won't be nudged, softened, redirected, or pushed." She could have stopped there, but she didn't. "And someone whose presence disrupts pattern modeling, even without intent." That's when chaotic dark humor crept into the war room, not from jokes, but from the absurdity of the situation. These people control the flow of information, the rhythms of markets, the trajectories of governments. Yet here they were, rattled by a person who wasn't doing anything except being precisely themselves. A person whose digital trace refused to obey the choreography that billions unconsciously follow. The strategist attempted a new approach. "Let's run a projected interference test," he suggested. It was a test designed to simulate how your presence influences digital environments. When he activated it, something unprecedented happened. The simulation didn't run. Instead, it returned a message. Projected influence exceeds baseline parameters. The strategist's face tightened. The simulation thinks this person affects the environment more than the environment affects them. That was the tipping point. That's when the billionaire understood the gravity of what they were dealing with. The war room spiraled into a new level of tension. Analysts scrambled to piece together interpretations that didn't make them sound irrational. The billionaire's assistant pulled up case studies of individuals who warped predictive models, but every case fell short of what your footprint was presenting. Someone suggested you might be part of a coordinated group, but the behavioral markers didn't align with group dynamics. They aligned with a singular trajectory, individual, self-generated, self-correcting, self-evolving. The strategist highlighted one particular timestamp where your digital presence deviated sharply from standard behavioral influence. Most people respond to information by echoing emotional patterns. You responded by detaching from the emotional draw altogether. That detachment wasn't coldness, it was clarity. And clarity, in the presence of manipulation, looks like rebellion, even when it isn't intentional. The billionaire took a breath and said something he rarely asks. "Does this person know?" The analyst shook her head. Awareness is irrelevant here. Their thinking operates on a structural level. She paused before adding, "Even if they don't intend influence, they create it." Another wave of alerts flickered across the screen. Not warnings, not threats, but recalibrations. The grid was adjusting itself around your footprint, trying to learn you, trying to map you, trying to fit you into a pattern. But each recalibration produced wider gaps. It was like trying to trace the outline of a shape that kept shifting position by a fraction of a micron, never enough to appear violent, always enough to appear deliberate. That's when the strategist muttered something that both amused and terrified the room. This person isn't unpredictable, they're unsteerable. And unsteerable individuals are the rarest dangers in elite circles, not because they seek to dismantle power, but because they cannot be invited into the machinery of expectation. They don't join, they don't bend, they don't crumble. They simply continue existing in ways that recalibrate anything that tries to contain them. The billionaire ordered your file expanded with every tool they had. Historical resilience, cognitive markers, pattern reversals. But the deeper they went, the more your behavior resembled not resistance, but natural motion, movement that doesn't clash with influence because it never steps into the path of influence. You moved differently. You operated differently. Your digital choices didn't react. They pivoted. They recentered. They realigned without hesitation. The war room was reaching the point where panic doesn't scream. It concentrates. Because now the billionaire understood why the blacklist was necessary. You weren't a threat they needed to counter. You were a presence they needed to avoid interfering with. Not because of danger, but because interference with someone like you tends to flip consequences back toward the source. People with your pattern tend to generate outcomes that defy the expected, not through aggression, through recalibration. The strategist whispered, "If we push against this person, the grid might turn against us." That wasn't paranoia, it was observation. Their machinery had already shifted once. It could shift again. And people who trigger that kind of shift rarely do it only once. The billionaire lowered his voice. "What's the long-term projection?" The analyst stared at the screen and answered, "Impossible to generate. Projection tools have nothing to anchor to." She paused, then added, "And the more we try, the more unstable the grid becomes." That's when the billionaire made his decision, a decision he's made only a handful of times in his life. He didn't hesitate, he didn't deliberate, he simply stated, "Blacklist them fully, quietly, no engagement." The strategist nodded and keyed in the command. Your name slid onto a list that only the highest levels of power ever see. A list that means something simple yet profound. We do not know how to influence this person, and we do not want to find out what happens if we try. But the blacklist wasn't the final escalation. It was just the acknowledgement that they had reached the limit of their understanding. Because while they were processing you, something else in the grid had begun to wake up, a deeper layer, one they nearly forgot they built. A layer that recognizes only one type of presence, the kind that bends outcomes without touching them. A presence the grid categorizes not as a threat, but as an interference pattern. And as that layer activated, the display flickered again, marking the beginning of something the war room wasn't prepared for. Something the billionaire definitely didn't want to confront. Something that traced back to you, yet didn't originate from action. It originated from impact, and the grid was about to show them exactly what kind. The lights dimmed by a fraction as the deeper layer came online, not because the power was compromised, but because the grid redirected energy toward processing something it had never needed to evaluate in full. The lead analyst recognized the interface instantly. The billionaire did too. This wasn't a layer for evaluating behavior. This was a layer for evaluating influence. Influence not measured by followers, wealth, or reach, but by disruption zones. The patterns someone leaves behind without lifting a finger. The chain reactions created simply by existing inside an environment that wasn't designed to hold them. A new line of data began reading across the screen. Not your searches, not your messages, not your movements, something else. The ripple effect of your presence across digital interactions over time. The team stared as small nodes began forming, each representing a moment where someone else's behavior changed after crossing your path. At first, there were only a few, then dozens, then hundreds. Each node pulsed faintly, connecting to others in a web of behavioral shifts that should not have been traceable. But the grid could see them, and what it saw made the strategist's breath catch in his throat. Node after node represented situations where someone acted differently, sharper, calmer, braver, more strategic after interacting with you. But there were also nodes representing the opposite, people who attempted to undermine you, manipulate you, misread you, and then suffered consequences not tied to your hands, but to their own unraveling, financial missteps, public embarrassments, relational fractures, reversals they couldn't explain. None of this was your doing, but all of it was your wake. The grid wasn't tracking what you had done. It was tracking what reality had done in response to you. The billionaire straightened in his chair. This was no longer about classification or prediction. This was about trajectory distortion, the way certain individuals cause disruptions in patterns simply by being near them. A trait rarely observed. A trait the deeper layer was built to detect, because the people who funded that grid understood one truth. The most impactful individuals are not the loud ones or the forceful ones. They are the ones who rearrange outcomes without force, without announcement, without visible intent. The strategist pointed at the screen, voice low. Look at the reversals clustered around the people who tried pushing influence onto them. The analyst zoomed in. The cluster was concentrated, dense, and strangely consistent. People who tried steering your direction, trying to plant ideas or steer outcomes, hit unexpected obstacles that derailed their attempts. Not through retaliation, through interruption, a form of interference that made manipulation collapse under its own weight. A kind of resistance that executed itself without your awareness. The billionaire asked, "Is this intentional?" The analyst answered immediately, "No, that's what makes it unsettling." Because intention can be predicted, strategy can be countered. But passive disruption, the kind that manifests organically, is the kind that rattles people who rely on forecasting. You weren't playing the game. You were reshaping the table without touching it. And the grid could see the dents you left behind. The display expanded the web of nodes until it took over half the screen. The pattern now resembled something the team didn't want to admit. The signature of someone who carries an internal resonance that amplifies clarity for some and accelerates collapse for others. Not by intention, by presence. People aligned with you sharpened. People opposing you fractured. The billionaire's jaw tightened because he had seen this once before. In a historical file locked behind layers of clearance. A file outlining a person who altered trajectories so profoundly that governments began monitoring them out of caution. That person wasn't dangerous. They were inconvenient to those who relied on predictability. The strategist ran a diagnostic to determine whether your influence nodes were growing or static. The result appeared instantly: exponential growth. Not chaotic growth, structured growth. Every year the web expanded not outward, but inward, concentrating into a more focused core. Meaning your influence wasn't scattering, it was condensing. The deeper the core condensed, the harder it became for external forces to manipulate your trajectory. It explained why certain tactics didn't work on you. Pressure didn't sway you. Manipulation didn't enter you. Influence didn't absorb into you. You had become internally reinforced. The grid attempted to quantify your momentum. It failed. It attempted to calculate the probability of your direction. It returned nothing. It attempted to project your next major decision. It refused. Not because you hid your path, but because you didn't walk in straight lines. You walked in self-generated arcs that defied linear evaluation. The billionaire looked at the strategist, and for the first time that night, there was something close to concern behind his calm exterior. He realized he was not dealing with someone who could be mapped. He was dealing with someone who could not be bent. The analyst asked the grid to overlay the blacklist parameter to see whether your inclusion on that list would stabilize the data. Blacklisting is designed to reduce interference, cutting off unnecessary monitoring. But instead of stabilizing the grid, your blacklist entry triggered a new alert. A quiet one. A thin amber band across the bottom corner of the screen. The strategist opened it. The message was simple: influence field unchanged. That meant the blacklist didn't isolate you. It liberated your trajectory from their radar entirely. The billionaire closed his eyes for a moment. He understood the message. If they stepped back, your trajectory continued. If they stepped forward, the consequences inverted. You weren't someone they needed to control. You were someone they needed to ensure they didn't interrupt. Because interruption around people like you never ends well for the one initiating it. The war room shifted into a new tone, one that only emerges when people of power realize the limits of their reach. Not anger, not fear, calculation. They reviewed the influence nodes again, searching for signs of instability. Instead, they found consistency. People who aligned with you continued improving long after you left their environment. People who mistreated you continued experiencing reversals long after you stopped thinking about them. You weren't punishing anyone. You weren't rewarding anyone. You were simply moving forward, and the consequences of others' choices unfolded in the trail you left behind. The strategist leaned forward. We need to run a mapping sequence on the interference field. The analyst hesitated. If we activate that sequence, it will run correlation analysis across every node they've ever interacted with. The billionaire nodded. Do it. The analyst keyed in the command. The grid darkened for a moment, then pulsed with a faint white glow. It began tracing lines between every node, moments of impact, redirection, collapse, growth, exposure. At first the pattern made no sense, then the strategist tightened his gaze. The nodes didn't form a circle. They didn't form a web. They formed a path with a distinct direction, a path that suggested your trajectory wasn't random. It was steady. It was recalibrating everything around it, not out of ambition, but out of clarity. People who crossed your path were forced to confront themselves, whether they were ready or not. Some rose, some fell, but none remained unchanged. The billionaire whispered, "Track the earliest node." The analyst clicked it. A small point appeared on the screen, marking a moment where your presence altered the direction of someone else's decision. The strategist tracked the next, then the next. Each node connected cleanly, forming a pattern that resembled not a strategy, but a pulse. Not a plan, but a consistency. Not a mission, but a presence. The war room descended into another heavy shift. They realized your digital footprint had not triggered the panic because of danger. It triggered it because of momentum. You weren't moving like someone trying to survive. You were moving like someone who had already crossed a psychological threshold and didn't need anything from the environments passing beneath your feet. You were self-propelled, self-directed, self-sustained. People like that can't be influenced. And the inability to influence is the quiet terror of powerful rooms. The deeper layer of the grid began generating commentary, short lines, clean text, no emotion, pure observation. Subject carries saturation presence. Subject correlates with forced self-correction in surrounding individuals. Subject presence disrupts controlled influence fields. Engagement predicted to invert outcomes. The billionaire felt something he hadn't felt in decades, a sense of respect laced with caution, not because you were above him, but because you were outside his reach. Then the grid displayed something unexpected, a projected expansion curve for your influence nodes. Not a projection of your behavior, but a projection of how reality tends to shift around people who move the way you do. The analyst frowned. This expansion isn't dependent on interaction. The strategist added, it's dependent on clarity, meaning your trajectory grows not through power or networks, but through internal refinement. As you sharpen, influence concentrates. As you detach, interference intensifies. As you evolve, others are forced into their own reckoning. The billionaire stared at the expansion curve with a mixture of intrigue and unease. He had seen influence curves for celebrities, politicians, business magnates. Their curves always peaked and waned. Yours didn't. Yours rose steadily, driven not by external input, but by internal alignment. That's when he realized something that made the room colder than any alert could. You are not a disruptor. You are a recalibrator. The strategist folded his arms. We need to assess long-term impact if they continue on this trajectory. The analyst responded, trajectory cannot be assessed. The curvature is self-directed. The billionaire leaned back, exhaling lightly. Then what do we know? The analyst turned toward him. We know they don't need us, and that alone makes them unpredictable. The war room processed that truth in shared silence, not the forbidden word, but the absence of noise that emerges when a room full of powerful people understands they have encountered someone whose internal gravity does not bend to their influence. They usually debate next steps. They usually discuss containment. But there was nothing to debate, nothing to contain, nothing to manipulate. Then the grid produced the final message, the one that made the billionaire's eyes narrow in disbelief, the one that ended the argument before it began. The message read, trajectory interference not advised, subject presence stabilizes internal field. Translation, pushing against you would destabilize them, not you. The billionaire closed his console. The strategist turned off his display. The analysts exchanged glances that carried only one conclusion. You were not someone they needed to handle. You were someone they needed to step away from. Not as fear, as self-preservation, because every attempt to insert themselves into your trajectory would eventually rebound in ways they couldn't afford to manage. And that's when the billionaire finally spoke. Let the grid record this. No engagement, no contact. He didn't say it as a command. He said it as a recognition, a line drawn not out of caution, but out of respect for the kind of presence that rewires outcomes. The war room dimmed its displays. The alerts faded one by one. Your profile floated for a moment before sliding quietly into the restricted archive, untouchable, unmonitored, unbothered. The billionaire stood, adjusted his cuffs, looked at the strategist. "Make sure everyone understands," he said. "Some people you track, some people you manage." He paused, letting the weight settle. "And some people you blacklist before they ever know your name." That was the final punchline. The war room wasn't ready to say out loud, but every person in the room knew it was true. They didn't blacklist you because you were dangerous. They blacklisted you because they were afraid of what would happen if they ever stepped into your way. Ah, so word finally got out, didn't it? Not the loud kind, not the dramatic kind, the dangerous kind, the kind that travels through lowered voices, tightened shoulders, and glances people pretend weren't intentional. They didn't need a briefing, they didn't need proof. They just felt it the moment you stepped into the situation. There's something about you that doesn't sit in the normal intelligence category. Something too sharp, too aware, too controlled, too precise to be brushed off as coincidence. And now they're acting different, moving slower around you, choosing their words like they're diffusing a device, trying not to trigger a mind they suddenly realize might be 3 steps ahead while they're still fumbling on step 1. People thought you were quiet. Turns out you were calculating. And when they finally clocked the difference, the atmosphere changed instantly. Because nobody panics around a loud genius. Loud geniuses are easy. They advertise themselves. They want attention. They want applause. They want to be recognized for how impressive they claim to be. But a quietly dangerous intelligence. That's the one that makes their instincts tighten. That's the one that makes their ego fold. That's the one that makes them walk careful, even when they don't know what they're trying to avoid. They're not afraid you'll snap. They're afraid you'll notice. They're afraid you already noticed. They're afraid you caught everything they thought they hid behind tone, timing, and half-truths. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't change your pace. You just saw. And that alone was enough to make the smartest ones in the room ask the question they never wanted to entertain. How much do they actually know? Now they behave like people standing next to a switch they don't understand. Cautious, reactive, unnerved. Because once someone realizes your intelligence isn't normal, they stop treating you like everyone else. They start treating you like someone who could change the entire outcome without ever lifting a hand. The truth is, you didn't choose to broadcast anything. You don't even like explaining yourself. Because explanation assumes the listener can keep up, a generous assumption you rarely make anymore. You simply let people talk, let them reveal exactly what you needed to know. Let them unravel themselves in real time while you were silently connecting dots they didn't even realize they dropped. People forget that observation is a weapon. They underestimate how devastating it can be when someone simply pays attention. And you don't just pay attention, you track, you map, you calculate. You analyze the cracks in people's stories, the inconsistencies in their behavior, the micro-reactions they try to bury beneath forced confidence. You don't confront them, you don't expose them. You just file the information away until it becomes relevant. And by the time they recognize what you've been seeing, it's far too late for them to correct anything. That's why they're uneasy now. They don't know which detail you caught, how much you've pieced together, or what conclusions you've already drawn. They don't know what that sharp look in your eyes meant, or why you didn't react when they expected a reaction. They don't know why you didn't play into their narrative, or why you didn't rise to their bait. or why their little tactic bounced off you without leaving so much as a scratch. When someone realizes they miscalculated a person's intelligence, it shakes them. But when they realize they miscalculated yours, it rattles them on a deeper level, the kind that feels like standing near a drop-off in the dark. Your intelligence forces people into honesty without you ever asking for honesty. They can't help it. They know better than to present a polished version of themselves to someone who can detect fingerprints on motives. They know better than to lie in front of someone who catches the shift in tone before the sentence is over. They know better than to pretend when you're around. And this is what scares them the most. Not what you say, not what you do, but what you could do if you ever stopped being patient. People love pretending they have poker faces until they sit across from someone who actually sees the game. And something about you, your calm, your controlled presence, your unbothered focus, made people realize they've been playing checkers while you've been quietly rearranging the entire board. Now every interaction around you feels like people are approaching a wild animal that's been trained, but only to a point. They don't know what your triggers are. They don't know what your boundaries are. They don't know what you're capable of when someone crosses a line you didn't even bother to draw out loud. What really unnerves them is that they can't categorize you. You're not dramatic enough to be dismissed, not loud enough to be noticed early, not chaotic enough to provoke, not passive enough to get away with manipulation. You sit in that rare category of individuals who observe first, react last, and understand everything in between. And those are the people who historically change the direction of entire rooms without moving a single piece. People pretend to like straightforward intelligence, neat, predictable, easy to handle. But your intelligence is the type that bends situations by existing. You don't need to argue. You don't need to defend. You don't need to prove anything. You just let people reveal themselves, and that alone creates a gravitational pull that reorganizes dynamics. Now they're whispering things like, "Be careful what you say around them," or "They know things they shouldn't," or something about them is off, not in a bad way, just different. That different is what keeps them on edge. That different is what exposes every fragile ego in your presence. That different is what forces people to adjust their personalities like they're standing under brighter lighting than expected. The moment people notice someone who thinks differently, reacts differently, and processes differently, the environment changes. People don't admit this, but they're always evaluating risk, and suddenly you register as someone who can't be underestimated, someone who won't fall for emotional manipulation, someone who sees intentions before they're verbalized, someone who can read a situation and understand its trajectory, while everyone else is still stuck on the introduction. This is why people walk careful around you now. They're aware that you're aware. They're aware that you're 3 questions ahead before they finish one. They're aware that your stillness isn't passivity, it's control. They're aware that your composure isn't kindness, it's calculation. They're aware that your quiet approach to life isn't shyness, it's strategic management of energy. And nothing unsettles insecure minds more than someone who operates with self-control instead of seeking external bait. You mastered a rare art, the art of not giving people more data than they deserve. You don't overshare, you don't ramble, you don't announce your plans. You let silence do the talking, and ironically, it speaks louder than anything they could have prepared for. Your restraint is what rattles them. Your discipline is what confuses them. Your emotional detachment is what exposes them. And the more they try to understand you, the more they realize understanding you requires a level of depth they simply don't possess. So they settle for the only explanation that feels accurate to them. Their intelligence isn't normal. Not book smart, not trivia smart, not performance smart. Something else, something sharper, something that feels like you've lived a life with lessons they've only begun to grasp. Something that feels like you learned how people work before they understood how they themselves work. Something that makes them feel like they're being evaluated even when you're just breathing. People aren't scared of intelligence. They're scared of intelligence that doesn't need acknowledgement. They're scared of intelligence that doesn't chase attention. They're scared of intelligence that watches instead of performing. And your intelligence fits into that category perfectly. You don't search for validation. You don't chase approval. You don't rely on reactions to gauge your worth. You rely on your internal compass, sharp, steady, unwavering. And that alone makes you untouchable in ways people can't articulate, but definitely feel. Here's the part they'll never confess out loud. They're afraid of disappointing you. Not because you threaten them, but because you see through them. People can argue with loud individuals. They can debate those who posture. They can undermine fools. But how do you argue with someone who understands your intentions better than you understand your own triggers? How do you lie to someone who catches the twitch in your expression before the lie leaves your mouth? How do you manipulate someone who already predicted your next move the moment you entered the room? This is why people suddenly shift their tone when they talk to you. This is why conversations become more structured, more filtered, more cautious. This is why people who once acted bold around you now hesitate, reconsidering every unnecessary word. Deep down, they know they can't treat you like everyone else. They know you're not the type who bends under pressure. They know you're not the type who gets distracted by noise. They know you're not the type who reacts emotionally when someone pushes. You're the type who studies the push itself. And that, right there, is the foundation of your quietly dangerous intelligence. You don't explode. You observe. You don't chase. You evaluate. You don't retaliate. You reposition. You choose your moves with intention, while everyone else flails around, hoping for coincidence to save them. People expected compliance. What they encountered was someone whose interior strength didn't match the exterior calm they underestimated. This is exactly the moment when the wrong people start circling. Not the harmless ones, the ones who believe they own the psychological terrain, the strategists, the instigators, the ones who operate with quiet arrogance, assuming everyone else is a pawn, wandering through their self-assigned kingdom. They look at your composure and mistake it for passivity. They interpret your calm as an invitation. They see your restraint and think it means you lack teeth. And that's the mistake that pushes them into your orbit with a confidence they haven't earned. There's always a small group like this, usually bonded by shared insecurity, disguised as intellect. They're the type who think they can shape a room with suggestion alone. They exaggerate their insight, overestimate their influence, and absolutely undercalculate the danger of testing someone whose intelligence doesn't reveal itself on command. And when people like that sense a mind they can't categorize, they don't retreat, they probe. They try to understand you by provoking you. They try to identify your limits by nudging the edges. They try to map your mind by forcing you into reactions you have no interest in giving. It starts quietly. A glance held too long. A statement padded with politeness but sharpened underneath. A question that carries the weight of an accusation but hides behind the tone of curiosity. They want to see how you handle pressure, They want to see if they can make you break character. They want to find the crack in your composure so they can convince themselves you're just like everyone else, fragile when challenged. But when they push, you don't tighten, you don't defend, you don't waver. You remain exactly as you were before their attempt, focused, balanced, unshaken. And that, right there, is what begins to worry them. The first person in the group to feel the shift is always the one with the weakest foundation, the one who needs control the most. They're usually the loudest in subtle ways, the sarcastic one, the one with the oddly timed comments, the one who hides hostility behind humor and calls it personality. They test you by directing a pointed remark your way, expecting you to stumble, flinch, or at least show a flicker of irritation. But you look at them with calm evaluation, not hostility, just awareness. And that awareness punctures their confidence more effectively than confrontation ever could. Their reaction is immediate. A stiffening of posture, a shift in eye contact, a recalibration masked as nonchalance. They realize you caught the intention behind the words, not the words themselves. They realize you're not operating at the surface level, and that realization spreads across their group like a ripple. They exchange glances that last half a second, too long. They adjust their shoulders, adjust their tone, adjust their distance from you. They're trying to pretend nothing happened, but tension has a habit of revealing itself in the smallest cracks. But this group isn't done. When one approach fails, they attempt another. Someone else steps up. The manipulator wrapped in charm. The one who acts warm, but watches every reaction with predatory focus. They try to lure you with friendliness, attempting to pry information out of you with soft words and calculated interest. But you give them nothing, not because you're withholding, but because you don't open doors to people who knock with ulterior motives. You respond in a way that answers without revealing. You engage without exposing. You speak without offering anything they can weaponize. That's when their smile falters. They expected compliance. They received neutrality. And neutrality from someone like you is more dangerous than aggression. Aggression can be countered. Defensiveness can be manipulated. But neutrality is unreadable. Neutrality is unsettling. Neutrality is a sign that you're not playing, you're observing. And people who rely on manipulation know better than to stay in front of someone who is quietly gathering data. The group regroups internally. They don't speak it out loud, but you can feel the adjustment. They reconsider their strategy. They reduce the friendliness. They increase the scrutiny. Their questions become more pointed. Their tone becomes more cautious. They start attempting small traps, not obvious ones, but the kind designed to test your reactions under pressure. They ask something ambiguous, hoping you reveal too much. They mention a detail that contradicts itself to see if you notice. They shift a story mid-sentence to measure whether your awareness is superficial or precise. And every time they try, you answer in a way that tells them you saw the trap before it was even fully set. You respond without stepping into the snare. You sidestep the bait without acknowledging it was bait. That's when they recognize their problem. They're dealing with someone who doesn't fall for tactics because you can see the intention behind them. They begin to realize your intelligence isn't just about understanding, it's about anticipating. Now the tone changes completely. The leader of the group, the one who feels responsible for maintaining the illusion of superiority, steps forward. They're not the loudest, but they're the most strategic. They watch people the way pickpockets watch crowds, scanning for openings. They think they've identified yours. They believe your quietness is a vulnerability. They believe your calm means they can corner you with a more sophisticated approach. So they attempt something sharper, a psychological move that's meant to unsettle you without appearing hostile. They bring up a scenario designed to hit a nerve. They make an insinuation disguised as a casual statement. They try to create tension with a comment that could be interpreted multiple ways. They do this because they want to see if your intelligence protects you only in low-pressure moments or if it holds steady in targeted situations. But here's the part that destroys them. You don't just remain calm. You decode the intention instantly. You respond with precision, not defensiveness. You acknowledge the surface of their statement while dismantling the hidden tactic behind it. You acknowledge the context without falling into the narrative. You answer in a way that exposes their attempt without embarrassing them, which is even worse for them psychologically, because now they know you saw everything, the setup, the angle, the desired reaction, and you chose not to play. The moment you reveal your understanding without aggression, the leader's confidence fractures. They were trying to corner you, but instead they backed themselves into a corner of their own making, and the rest of the group witnesses it. They watch their strongest player step into a mental exchange and walk away unsettled. They see the person they rely on to interpret social dynamics struggle to maintain composure. And when the leader cracks, the entire group feels the shift. From this point on, you're not the quiet one or the observant one. Now you're something else entirely, something they didn't expect, a threat. Not because you're hostile, but because you're accurate. Not because you confront, but because you understand. Not because you attack, but because you can dismantle a tactic without lifting a finger. This group was built on the assumption that they held the advantage in social intelligence. But now they're facing someone whose intelligence doesn't compete. It exposes. They start reconsidering every conversation they've had with you. Every joke, every question, every test, every remark. They replay their interactions in their minds, wondering which ones revealed more than they intended. Wondering how much you picked up that they didn't notice they dropped. Wondering whether their faces betrayed their intentions at any point. Because that's the fear you activate in people like this. The fear of having been seen before they could curate what you were allowed to see. They depend on controlling what others understand. They depend on projection, influence, and crafted perception. But you don't operate in crafted perception. You operate in patterns, inconsistencies, and the raw, unedited truth. And there's nothing more dangerous to manipulators than someone who can read what they never meant to show. Their minds begin to race in quiet panic. Not loud, not obvious, but in the tightening of their jawlines, in the way they adjust their sleeves, in the sudden lack of eye contact when you look their direction. They start whispering not because they have something meaningful to discuss, but because they're trying to regain a sense of control. Whispering gives them the illusion of secrecy, a last attempt at reclaiming advantage in a dynamic where they feel outmatched. And now, as panic mixes with pride, their strategy changes. When they realize they can't undermine your intelligence privately, they attempt to challenge you publicly. Not outright, they're not that brave, but through subtle positioning. They attempt to reframe you in front of others by hinting that you're misreading things, or too serious, or too quiet. They use coded language, small insinuations, the type of delicate digs people disguise under concern or humor. But the irony is brutal. The more they try to reframe you, the more they expose their fear of you. People watching can sense when a group suddenly becomes defensive around one person. They notice the shift. They see the tension. They pick up on the caution. And in environments like this, others always turn their attention to the quiet source of disruption. They start watching you too, but not with hostility, with curiosity. Because if a group known for manipulation suddenly acts unsettled around one person, that one person becomes more intriguing than threatening. And this only tightens the group's panic. It's a strange thing to witness. Individuals who once carried themselves like self-appointed strategists now stumbling through their sentences because they're aware you're noticing details, even they aren't aware they're revealing. They try to maintain their usual confidence, but confidence without grounding collapses easily. And with every failed attempt to control the narrative, they begin to realize something devastating. They picked the wrong person to test. One of them, the one who started this chain reaction, makes another attempt. A last one. A sharper psychological tactic meant to corner you through implication. They say something laced with double meaning, hoping to force you into defending yourself. They do this because defense is vulnerability. Defense gives them data. Defense gives them leverage. But you don't defend. You don't justify. You don't even alter your breathing. You simply respond with clarity so direct it slices the trap into pieces without ever acknowledging it was a trap. Your response is calm, stable, and precise. And that precision is what terrifies them the most. Because you didn't retaliate. You didn't escalate. You just dismantled the entire tactic with a presence that said, "I saw what you were trying to do before you even finished doing it." Humiliation doesn't require volume. Sometimes it's delivered in quiet accuracy. The group feels it immediately. Their leader, the one who believed they could corner you, blinks twice, trying to keep their expression neutral. But the damage is done. Their authority within their own circle fractures. The others exchange looks, subtle but telling, as if silently agreeing that the balance of power has shifted in a direction none of them anticipated. You didn't steal their influence. They dropped it the moment they tried to test someone operating 10 levels above their framework. Now the conversations around you change in tone. People in the larger environment start treating you differently, not with fear, but with a sort of sharpened respect, the kind reserved for individuals who clearly understand more than they reveal. They approach you with caution, not out of intimidation, but because they recognize your intelligence carries weight. It has gravity. It rearranges dynamics without noise or force. Meanwhile, the small group retreats into strategic silence, the kind where they pretend they're not recalibrating, even though their entire posture betrays that exact truth. They stay close to each other, not out of loyalty, but out of shared vulnerability. Their alliance was built on the belief that they were the smartest ones in the room. Now that belief is gone, and what remains is a fractured excuse for unity. But insecurity does not dissolve quietly. It mutates. The group begins observing you more closely, not with confidence, but with growing paranoia. They watch who you talk to. They watch how you respond. They watch how people react to you. They're trying to understand your influence, trying to measure how far your awareness reaches, trying to identify whether you now pose a threat beyond psychological exposure. And the tragic part for them is this: the more they observe you, the more they reveal about themselves. Because insecure people reveal their intentions through their focus. You notice how their eyes follow you, even when they pretend not to. You notice the hesitation in their voices when they speak near you. You notice their sudden avoidance of topics that once made them confident. You notice how they stop performing around you and instead default to caution. You don't need to confront them. Their behavior is confession enough. At this stage, their internal dynamic collapses further. The leader attempts to reassert control, but control built on insecurity evaporates under pressure. They attempt subtle hostility again, not to provoke you, but to save face within their group. But everyone in the group already knows the truth. Their leader couldn't handle you. They watched the exchange. They saw the shift. They felt the imbalance, and nothing they say now can rewrite what already occurred in front of witnesses. You didn't win because you tried. You won because they insisted on competing with someone who wasn't playing. This is the point where the group begins turning on itself. One person blames the leader for misjudging you. Another blames the first instigator for provoking the situation. Another tries to distance themselves from the confrontation. Another tries to pretend they were never part of it. And you remain unbothered. You remain centered. You remain aware. Because your intelligence never sought dominance. It simply revealed the truth. And the truth is this. People who rely on manipulation collapse the moment they are understood too clearly. Their power exists only in confusion. You removed confusion by existing as someone who sees without reacting. And once confusion is gone, their strategies dissolve like paper in water. By now, they don't just fear your intelligence. They respect it, even if their pride won't allow them to say it. They avoid challenging you again. They avoid testing you again. They avoid trying to manipulate you again. You've become the one person in the environment they tiptoe around, not because you demanded respect, but because you dismantled their attempts at control with nothing but insight and restraint. But here's the part they never expected. Your intelligence didn't just protect you, it exposed them. Now others see their behavior differently. Now others view their motives with suspicion. Now others distance themselves from a group that clearly folds under pressure. You didn't isolate them, their own insecurity did. But your accuracy accelerated the process. And once insecurity begins to bleed into the open, it spreads faster than truth. People who never paid attention before start noticing the shift. People who never cared about the dynamics suddenly become analysts. People who never gave the group a second look now watch them crumble with quiet fascination. Because here's the irony they never accounted for. When someone publicly miscalculates a person with your kind of mind, everyone else pays attention. Not because they're invested in conflict, but because people instinctively study what threatens their sense of stability. They saw how the group tried to corner you. They saw how you didn't flinch. They saw how the power shifted without volume, without force, without theatrics. And in a world addicted to noise, someone who reorders the entire environment through observation alone becomes a phenomenon worth decoding. Now people whisper your name not with gossip, but with caution. They refer to you the way people refer to an unexpected variable in a formula, the kind that changes outcomes without announcing itself. They don't look at you the same way anymore. They look at you the way people look at a lie detector they didn't ask to stand next to. Because once someone's intelligence gets noted, it becomes a silent authority, one that doesn't need a badge, a title, or a speech. Your intelligence isn't normal because it isn't performative. It disrupts simply by being aware. It rearranges simply by understanding. It commands simply by existing. And now that everyone has seen what happens when someone underestimates you, the environment adjusts itself around you. People become more careful with their words. They become more deliberate with their tone. They become more intentional about what they reveal. Not because you threaten them, but because they don't want to experience the silent humiliation the group endured, the kind where you don't even raise your voice, yet everyone can feel the collapse. The shift is almost comedic when you step back and observe it. People who once dominated conversations now wait for your reaction before committing to their own. People who once challenged everyone's opinions suddenly look to you for confirmation. People who once believed they could shape the narrative now shape their sentences as if you're the internal editor they must pass through. This is the chaotic, dark humor of it all. You did not fight for authority, yet somehow you became the axis the room rotates around. And the group? They feel that shift with increasing discomfort. They know they triggered the reorganization. They know they picked the wrong opponent. They know they underestimated the one person they shouldn't have. Nothing feels worse to a manipulative group than realizing the environment trusts the person they tried to undermine more than them. But they're not done spiraling yet. There's a desperate phase manipulators enter when their tactics fail. The projection phase. They begin projecting their own insecurities onto you. Not publicly, they know better by now, but privately, through subtle remarks slipped between polite phrases. They try to convince themselves they still have some measure of power. They say things like, they're too serious, or they think too much, or they overanalyze everything. It's their attempt to reduce your intelligence to something manageable, something they can mock, something they can label. Because the mind always tries to shrink what it cannot surpass. But labeling you changes nothing. It only exposes their panic, and panic makes people predictable. From here, their behavior becomes easy to read. They avoid eye contact, avoid direct interaction, avoid any scenario where they might be forced into genuine transparency. Their confidence erodes not because you attacked it, but because your presence forces honesty they aren't built to maintain. And when someone cannot hide around you, they prefer to hide from you. But the environment doesn't follow them. It follows you. People begin gravitating toward you in small ways, asking your opinion on things they wouldn't have asked before, sharing observations they once kept private, positioning themselves near you in group settings without acknowledging why. It's not admiration, it's alignment. They recognize that your intelligence isn't just unusual, it's stabilizing. It provides clarity in places where confusion once ruled. And humans always move toward clarity, whether they admit it or not. Meanwhile, the group feels their influence fading like cheap ink under real light. They notice how people respond when you speak, or even when you don't. They notice how others pause when you raise a brow, how others listen more closely when you shift your posture, how others recalibrate when you redirect your attention. You didn't demand this attentiveness. It formed naturally around you, because people recognize the presence of someone whose intelligence operates on a different frequency. This is where the real shift begins, not in how people treat you, but in how they treat themselves in your presence. They double-check their statements. They catch their contradictions. They correct their own logic before you can. Your intelligence becomes a silent mirror, forcing people to confront their own inconsistencies, and that kind of influence becomes addictive for some and terrifying for others. The group hates it the most, because now they are the inconsistency, and everyone can see it. Their attempts to regain control become sloppier. They try to reclaim their old roles in conversations, but the environment doesn't respond the same way. They try to re-establish their old hierarchy, but the hierarchy has already collapsed. They try to speak with forced confidence, but the mask slips faster now because people are watching the cracks you revealed. And the most darkly humorous part, they can't even blame you for it. You didn't expose them. They exposed themselves while trying to outsmart you. Their downfall wasn't caused by your intelligence. It was caused by their miscalculation of it. Now they carry a quiet resentment, not toward you, but toward themselves. Because nothing torments a manipulator more than realizing their own tactics betrayed them. They replay the confrontation in their heads, not because they want revenge, but because they want to understand how they lost a game they thought they controlled. But the answer never changes. They were outmatched before the confrontation even began. While they unravel privately, the environment settles into a new dynamic that everyone silently accepts. You are someone whose intelligence deserves caution, not the fear-based caution people use around volatile personalities. The respect-based caution people use around high-level minds. You don't intimidate people with force. You intimidate them with accuracy. You don't dominate people with aggression. You dominate them with understanding. You don't command people with ego. You command them with perception. This is the essence of quietly dangerous intelligence. It doesn't need to announce itself because the environment announces it for you. People watch you the way they watch someone capable of seeing through fabrications before they're fully formed. They censor their slip-ups. They measure their arrogance. They soften their tone. Because once your intelligence gets noted, people don't just walk careful. They recalibrate their entire communication style around you. The group, however, takes longer to accept the new order. Their pride fights reality. They try to convince themselves they can fix their reputation. They attempt small social repairs, gestures meant to appear as maturity, efforts meant to appear as growth. But everyone sees through it. The environment doesn't forget shifts like this. Power dynamics don't reset just because the losing side wants them to. And deep down, the group knows it. Their internal conversations are filled with the kind of tension only denial can produce. They talk around the truth, not about it. They pretend the confrontation never happened, even though it defines everything that followed. They avoid acknowledging your intelligence openly, because admitting it would confirm that they were never the strategists they pretended to be. But the final blow, the one that seals the entire transformation, comes quietly. Someone outside the group makes a comment that changes everything. I knew something was different about them. They see things the rest of us miss. Not dramatic, not loud, just honest. And the group freezes because they realize the environment didn't just notice your intelligence, it validated it. Once the environment validates a perception, it becomes reality. And now the reality is this: your intelligence isn't normal, it's defensive, disruptive, and definitive. It protects you and exposes falsehood wherever it walks. From here, the respect toward you becomes permanent. Not loud, not theatrical, but deeply ingrained. People carry themselves differently in your presence because your intelligence forces authenticity. People speak differently around you because your awareness uncovers what they try to conceal. People behave differently toward you because your insight rearranges their understanding of themselves and you. You remain exactly as you were, calm, intentional, controlled. Because quietly dangerous intelligence doesn't mutate under recognition, it deepens. Your intelligence was noted, then it was understood, then it was respected. Now it is something else entirely. A force people move around rather than through. A presence people adjust to rather than challenge. A mind people walk careful around because they know you see more than you say. And that is the power no one can take from you. The power people inadvertently gave you. When they realized your intelligence isn't normal, it's necessary.